Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to rise for what time I have to speak for a few moments about Bill C-13. Bill C-13, of course, as it was introduced by the government to deal with the issue of cyberbullying. That was how it was lauded in the foyer of this chamber last week. That is, in fact, primarily how it's been discussed by the minister and by the parliamentary secretary. That it's focused, they would suggest, entirely on dealing with the problem of cyberbullying. What my colleague, our justice critic, the member from Gatineau, has pointed out is that the bill deals with two very serious issues. It deals with cyberbullying, but then it also deals with the whole question of the invasive interception of signals and the power of given to authorities, that it may, in fact, overreach. There have been concerns raised by privacy experts, by digital experts, that the government is being too cute by half, frankly, by trying to hide changes under the auspices of modernizing the criminal code and as changes to the criminal code simply to deal with the issue of cyberbullying. We are very concerned about this, and my colleague brought forward a very sensible motion asking government and other members of this House to split the bill. We have almost unanimous agreement in this House that the matter of cyberbullying needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed now. That we all recognize the fact that there's a gap in the criminal code that needs to be closed. We need to focus on that. We need to target that, and we can deal with it in a manner that is expeditious. We can have some debate in this House. We can go to committee. We can hear from the families affected. We can hear from experts, and undoubtedly we can come to some agreement to make sure that that piece of legislation gets through and gets enacted into law. That can be done as I said, very expeditiously, Mr. Speaker. But this government has decided to be, I would say, less than transparent. Be a surprise to anyone to hear me accuse the government of being less than straightforward, and they're introducing amendments that simply complicates the matter and will create some problems. I would suggest there's no question, and it concerns me, that the minister and the government have been extraordinarily disingenuous with this, and it concerns me considerably as a member of Parliament, as a politician, that this government is frankly playing on the emotions of the families involved, of individuals in this country that want to see this matter addressed with, and that's frankly shameful, Mr. Speaker. And I would have, even though I've been around this House for a while and this game for a while, nonetheless, it shocks me when I see acts of this kind. Let me take you back, though, about why it is that we're dealing at the moment with the question of cyberbullying and the problems. Mr. Speaker, it certainly came to my attention very quickly and very starkly last spring when 17-year-old Rehtaeh Parsons took her life. Her parents found her hanging, Mr. Speaker, in the bathroom of their house. This young woman was being bullied, was being harassed, was being cyberbullied as a result of an incident that had happened 2 years previously, where intimate images of her were being transmitted on the internet without her consent and with malicious intent. And the evidence would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that those actions and the subsequent ganging on of individuals, piling on of individuals, and the distribution of those images had the effect of that young woman feeling that she was completely without hope, and she took her own life. The government of Nova Scotia responded quickly, I would suggest. Back in 2011, there had been a cyberbullying task force that had done some with the chair of Wayne McKay, had done some impressive work and made some important recommendations about cyberbullying, had consulted with young people and all sectors throughout the province, and had come up with a set of recommendations that were clearly there, that were at hand. The government immediately moved to put some of those into place and to develop a response to this tragedy. Because it wasn't just Rehtaeh, Amanda Todd, it was Jamie Hubley, it was young Pam Murchison's daughter in Nova Scotia who was bullied online, Mr. Speaker, who took their life far too often, and it's a situation that clearly has reached a stage where we finally recognized as a society that this is behavior that has to stop, and that the government of this land has to bring forward changes to the criminal code, to the laws of the land, to make sure that people are held accountable, that people understand that there are consequences to this act, to these violent acts, and that they will be held accountable, Mr. Speaker. Changing the laws is not all that needs to be done. There's much more that needs to be done, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on, or perhaps tomorrow, depending on how much time I have. But last spring, in I believe it was late April, early May, Rehtaeh's mom came to Ottawa with her husband and met with the Minister of Justice and met with the Prime Minister to talk to them about the issue, to talk to them about the fact that they wanted to see some action. It was not only the Minister of Justice but also the Premier. They were with her and supporting the family and wanted to talk to the Prime Minister, the government, about what they were doing and what they thought the government of Canada could do in order to help in the response, because it has to be a collaborative response at all different levels. The same day, Mr. Speaker, Rehtaeh's mom came and visited with the Leader of the Official Opposition, my colleague, the member from Gatineau, and myself, and we listened to them, and we listened to their anguish, and we listened to their cry for some action on behalf of the government to try to make sure that the tragic circumstances that led to the death of their daughter did not continue. And the government of Canada did what it could. And we asked the Justice Minister and what they felt, the Justice Minister of Nova Scotia and the Parsons, what it was they felt needed to be done. And they talked about a gap in the criminal code. Mr. Justice specifically referred to Section 162, I believe it is, and some changes that needed to be done in order to make sure that the gap was closed. And they also told us that the government had given some commitment to act, to move forward on some of these things. And we made a commitment. We said to her, to Leah, what can we do? What can we do as the official opposition? She said to us, if you can help push the government, if you can do what you can to get the government to move forward to act on this, as they indicated to us they did. We made that commitment. We all made that commitment to them that we would hold the government's feet to the fire and move them forward. And from that, we came up with a private member's bill which was later tabled, and I was very proud to sponsor that bill, but it was a bill from the official opposition, from my leader and our justice critic and other members that are concerned about this issue, all members of our caucus. I tabled on our behalf, Bill 540, which was a piece of legislation that was very specific. It was targeted towards the issue of the non-consensual distribution of intimate images. And it laid out penalties, Mr. Speaker, and it was very targeted. It wasn't 60 pages. It was 1 page, maybe 2 pages. Now, the reason I raised that is because we brought it in the spring before the session ended, and we said to the government when it was introduced, here you go, this is what we think. We have consulted with experts on this issue, and this is the best advice that we've received that will deal with this issue, that this is our recommendation on how to close that gap. We can do it, and we can do it quickly. And we asked the government to move. That was before the House adjourned. We had hoped that we would see some action in early September. It didn't matter to me if they passed Robert Chisholm's sponsored bill C540. That doesn't matter. It was the issue, Mr. Speaker. It was the issue. I wanted the government to move forward on this issue. And I was excited, even though the government decided to prorogue the House and delay everything and not come in until October, the middle of October rather than the middle of September, further delaying dealing with this issue. Nonetheless, in the throne speech, they indicated that they were going to move forward on the issue. I was again encouraged by that. Here we are another month later, and the government, while it has moved forward with changes to the criminal code to deal with cyberbullying, Mr. Speaker, couldn't help themselves. They had to shove some more stuff in it. They had to try to hide some other things in behind those important provisions. They had to muck it up by dealing with issues that were contentious, a piece of legislation that got driven out of this House last year, Bill C-30. They brought those provisions in the back door. They tried to hide them in behind the provisions with respect to cyberbullying, thinking that nobody would notice. I'm telling you, I am focused like a laser on trying to get these changes to the criminal code and cyberbullying through. On behalf of not only, Rataya's family and the Todds and other families across this country, but anybody, any adult who has violence committed upon them as a result of the non-consensual distribution of intimate images, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes it's called revenge porn. I am focused like a laser to make sure that we get these changes through this House. But I can't tell you how much it sickens me that this government is bringing forward other changes that are making this bill extremely complicated. And there will be people coming forward at committee that will be raising serious concerns about what else this bill does rather than the cyberbullying. If the government was serious, they would have paid attention to the motion introduced by my colleague, the member from Gatineau, to split the bill, split it off. Sections 1 to 7 and Section 26, I believe it was, separate that into a bill on cyberbullying, and we'll deal with that, and we'll get it done. The other one would be an issue that the Justice Committee would deal with at some length. Mr. Speaker, it's a very important issue. It's a very complicated issue. It's a matter that must be dealt with. It must be dealt with in a number of ways, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. My time is almost up. I'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. I want to talk a little bit about the whole question of bullying and how we need a national strategy like the one introduced by my colleague, the member from Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. We need that kind of commitment to deal with bullying and cyberbullying, Mr. Speaker. I hope that we can deal with this once and for all on behalf of this government. I look forward to continuing my remarks tomorrow.